Hello, everyone. Welcome to night 8 of the Orphan Tales live reading series, book 2, night 8. It's not the greatest night, in the Briary, which is the name of my house. By the way, some of you may recognize it from Fairyland. I got news that my Uncle George died of COVID today, which is not, what you want to hear. And Heath's dad is ailing pretty badly, and my grandfather's not doing great either, so it's all just a little subdued around here. Which I guess is appropriate to the music, which is, as always, S.J. Tucker, but this is Manticore's Lullaby. So I apologize if I'm not at my brightest tonight. I do try, but life is not always bright. I don't really know what else to say to start things out. I have no memory of what we're about to read tonight, the Pig Tamers Tale. I'm reasonably confident that I wrote it, but I don't remember what that's all about at all. And it's funny because it says in the beginning about the hairy gray pigs, and I'm all about hairy gray pigs. I'm serious. Mangalitsa pigs are hairy and gray like that, and they're Hungarian, and I've been to Hungary and seen them and eaten them. They are amazing tasting and incredible looking. They look like prehistoric pigs. You barely recognize them as a pig. But I definitely had never seen them when I wrote this. So who knows where that came from. But yeah, I have absolutely no memory of it whatsoever. I don't know what's going to come. I haven't looked ahead. I never do. I don't prepare for these at all. I just assume that since I wrote it, I can read it. I make up voices on the fly and just plow ahead. So no clue what we're about to hit tonight. We'll see. So I'll do my intro stuff and we'll get into it. As always, this is not an audiobook of the Orphan's Tales. This is a play, a one-woman show. You can find music based on these books at sjtucker.com, including Manticore's Lullaby, which is playing right now. You can get copies of these books at your local independent bookseller's web portal, any of them, but if you'd like to patronize mine, it's printbookstore.com. You can find me on Twitter at Cat Valenti. You can subscribe to my Patreon at Cat Valenti, which will have a bunch of exciting rewards going live in the next week, including apparently a review of Hamilton, so strap yourself in for that. What comes next? You can catch up in the archive at Cat Valenti Live on YouTube, and you can ask me questions after the reading is over, but it's better if you think of them while I'm reading so that there's no dead air. The lipstick tonight is NYX, what's the kind? I think it's Lip Lingerie in Catsuit. It's actually one of my favorite sort of everyday lipsticks. I wear this all the time. It was given to me by my friend Chris, my BFF. And if you would like to, if you are so moved, you can toss a coin to your witch. There's a tip jar, a sad little tip teacup on my Instagram profile, my YouTube profile, and on my website at catherinevalenti.com. These are absolutely free readings, but if you would like to help us out, times are gross and tight and terrible. So I prefer all freelancers, but definitely here. So anything is appreciated that you can contribute. Doing these as long as I have since March is not nothing, though I say I don't prepare. I am getting up in makeup for you and putting my evenings aside. It is a certain amount of effort, so I appreciate anything you can give, and I will thank you by name on the next stream if anyone does tip me. So all that said, let me have sip to moisten the throat, and we'll get into our little piggy tale. Oh, thank you, Juniper. That's very sweet of you. And I will close my laptop so you don't have to hear any notifications. That's not exactly a romantic fairy tale sound. You have mail. Nothing says that anymore. All right, here we go. We are, as I said, we are grooving right along here. We're up to page 141, if you are following along at home. Oh, good. A name I don't remember how it's supposed to be pronounced. Okay, good, great. You know, I wrote these 20 years ago. Who knows? Not 20. This one wasn't written 20 years ago. This one was written 14 years ago. All right, The Pig Tamers Tale. Messignane has a tusk pipe, and a pig called Femi. And my pipe it is a hollow tooth, and my pig he is so named, and thus you may be reasonably sure that Messignane tells you these things. I am here because this is where we go, who travel and perform and live on the world, but not in it. The wind blows us together to exchange news and tricks and techniques, to whisper to each other what cities can afford us, to trade tightropes for horseshoes. The blue of my hair is paint, the shade of my eyes a cheap glamour purchased from a mixer of oils and unguents, who had a green cart and great, long fingers. I am dressed up no less than my boar. We do all these things, trade and die and dance and learn and part. It is a happy vagary of our lives. The word is passed horse to ox to magician to singer, and we wind our way eventually to an agreed upon dale. This is a vistrecha, a congress of fools. And I came to it from Barajas, and where I was born in the house of my father, who was also a fool, but the kind who likes to let milk curdle in the pail and beer lose its head to the breeze, not the professional kind. When I was grown and our hut of pigskins was low and warm in the jungles outside the city, we were too poor to live on the terraces near the palace with its perfumed queens. I often used to dream of catching a glimpse of one of those women, strange and exotic as chained leopards. But we lived on the outskirts, where the banana leaves cast green shadows and my father Femi slept behind the stove. This is not so odd. Certainly it was warm as a held breath in our forest, but it is a pleasant thing to sleep on the bricks behind our stove, warmed as they are by the bread baking against the side of the iron, and sweat away bad dreams and the occasional cough. I often wished to sleep there, but my father held his post like the last soldier on a hill. Father, I would say, go to the well, get us some water so that I can make us fish stew. My father Femi would roll over on his bricks. Why must you pester me, Messignane? What did I have a daughter for? Get it yourself. And so I would go and pull the water from the well with buckets of baobab wood, and the stew would be sweet anyhow, with green onions and pink tails floating in it. Father, I would say, go and cut us some camphor wood so that I may build up the fire and warm your brick, so that the hut may smell of cinnamon, not yesterday's fish stew. My father Femi would roll over on his bricks. Why must you pester me so, Messignane? What did I have a daughter for? Cut it yourself. And so I would go and cut the camphor wood and bring it in to dry, and the hut would smell of thick and spicy things, and the bricks would warm beneath my father's back. Father, I would say, go to the market, fetch us 2 black roosters so I may roast them up for us and stuff your pillows with the feathers. And my father would roll over on his bricks. Why must you pester me so, Messignane? What did I have a daughter for? Get it yourself. And so I went into the jungle, where the banana leaves are high and their fruit not yet ripe, where the cacao flowers are wet and pale. I was muddy to my knees by the time the road smoothed out through the coffee plants wavering white and green and red. My arms burned with shoving the forest aside to let me pass, and my face was full of the pricks of mosquitoes. But I could see the first rounded terrace tops, and my mouth watered for the chickens to come. But my legs are small. By the time I found a little butcher's shop with cockerels hanging in the window, all was dark and every door shut against me. My feet were torn and bloody, my shoes worn through to nothing, sweat clinging to my hair and my scalp as though I had slept all day on my father's stove. I looked up and down the narrow street, full of clothes shops where I could afford nothing, and bakeries already puffing the smoke of tomorrow's bread through their roofs. The palace hunched in the distance. The high wooded hills hid the moon from me. There was nowhere I could see that would open its doors to a goat-furred urchin, so with rather fewer sniffles than you might expect, I settled down against the brick wall of the butcher's shop to await the old red sun's return. I could not really sleep, but fitful dreams ran over my eyelids, leaving their tiny footprints. Some time after the moon had finally grunted and sweated and hoisted herself up over the treetops, I saw through slitted eyes a figure walking from the palace toward me. A man who was white all over, the white of milk or cheese or chalk, and he wore very little, his long muscled legs showing bare, his chest slung with a barbed harpoon and nothing more. His hair was long and straight, and in his arms he held a woman stiff and dead, her beautiful limbs frozen and unmoving, crystalline snakes wrapping her arms, her skin clear as the glass of a poultry seller's store. I had never seen anything so radiant and lovely as those two, and I think the man looked at me as he passed, but I cannot be sure. He cast a flitting light against the alley walls, shadows spitting angrily at stone. I could not help it. I was curious as a mouse who has not yet heard that someone somewhere has invented a thing called a trap. I followed them, creeping close behind. I followed them all through the night, in which they floated over the ground like moonlight that so rarely penetrates the banana canopy, and in the day, in which they still gleamed, as though their skin was hungry for light, always light. I followed them through the cacao flowers, wet and pale, and the coffee plants wavering white and green and red. I followed them through the baobabs with their roots like elephant trunks. I followed them past my own house. Now I loved my father as best I could. I did not think he would want to miss such a thing, passing by our very own door, so I rushed in and shook him awake on his stove. "Father," I cried, "the stars are stamping flat the banana leaves outside our door. Come and see." My father, Femi, rolled over on his bricks. "Why must you pester me so, Messignane? Did I have a daughter only to nag me and pelt me with lies? Go see yourself if you like, but leave me alone." "Father, I do not lie. Come and peek out of the door, just peek. And if there is no pale figure striding by, you may lie on your stove all day and night, and I will say nothing about it." My father grunted and slowly rolled back and forth, working himself up to standing. He stumbled off of his stove and went to the door, placing his eye to the jamb, and indeed, a slim, cream-blanched ankle was disappearing beyond a clutch of palm fronds. My father's face contorted like an acrobat's leg, as if in a daze he wandered out of the house and after the creatures. I knew he was not so thick as to be unmoved by our little plot of land alight with gods. The two of us, small and quiet, followed them through the night and into the day. But it was difficult to keep up. Sleeping on a stove does not really prepare a man for marathons through high bush. "I'm thirsty," whined my father, Femi. "What did I have a daughter for? Fetch me some water." "There's no clean water to be had, father. Be patient. Perhaps we will pass a stream." "But there is rain pooled in the leopard tracks here," he said, pointing at broad, deep paw prints. "It is not safe, Father Femi. Remember what your wife, my mother, said. Drink from the feet of a beast and win those feet for your own." After a long while, the jungle became thinner, and the mud turned to pebbles underfoot, and still we only saw the burnt leaves and steaming mist of their passing, and my father Femi cried out again. "I am thirsty. Find me some water, girl. What did I have a daughter for?" "There is no clean water to be had, father. Be patient. Perhaps we will come to a lake." "But there is rain pooled in the tiger tracks there, right here," he said, pointing at more deep, broad paw prints. "Remember what your wife, my mother, said. Drink from a footprint and it will not go well with your own scraggle toes." "Your mother is off whoring herself for the Rajah," my father snapped, eating sugar pies and lamb fat and sleeping in silk every night. His face was red as a boil. Tears leaped to my eyes. She didn't want to go. The procurers came and you wouldn't beat them back with your fists or your club or your bricks. You only slept on your stove and refused to budge. What did we have a daughter for, you said. You get her back if you want her so much, you said. We walked after the stars in sullen silence after that. High red berries glittered, and I was thirsty too, but I obeyed my mother. Finally, my father wailed a long, wretched sound. I am so thirsty the sides of my throat stick together, he cried. There is water in the boar prints. Let me drink, cruel Messignane. I turned to him. I planted my hands on my tiny hips. My face was flushed and sweat-stung, my arms itchy from biting vermin, my feet a bloody ache. We were losing their scent even as he dawdled. Fine, I cried. Drink from the hoofprints, father. Drink your fill. If you will just be quiet and do as you're told. Happily, my father Femi set to scooping the coppery water from the deep pig prints. Perhaps when we catch them, the stars will give me a new stove, with smooth bricks which do not leave marks on my back, he chortled. I crossed my arms over my chest and waited for him to finish. As I watched him gulp down the rainwater, mud trickled down into his chin, and before it could drip back again onto the churned earth, my father Femi's chin was considerably hairier and broader than it had been before. The filthy water frothed suddenly between two yellow tusks, his thick hair twisted into a forelock, his eyes grown tiny and beady. Before my eyes, my father twisted and grew until he was a great, huge, lumbering boar. And though I didn't mean to, I laughed at him squealing in the forest, still thirsty after all his slurping. Got an illustration here. The Manticore's tale continued. And here he is, the old beast, with no stove at all anymore, laughed the pig tamer, and gave her boar a little slap on the rump. He moaned, and through his snorting seemed to say, Why must you pester me so, Messignane? The blue-haired woman grinned at us. We lost their trail. I have an idea where they were going, but a star stays lost. I decided to make the best of it, and worked out this little act, which keeps me out of huts with stoves and in thick shoes. But I had to dress him up in ribbons and hats. Folk don't believe it's a tamed beast if it doesn't have the right costume. All tamed things are made a bit ridiculous in the process, you know. Immaculata was ashen, twisting her red ribbons with a shaking hand. It was Zemea, wasn't it? She's dead somehow, she's dead. That's the story we tell. And you'll find that story told quite a bit in the Vistrecha. After she ate up her wicked husband Indrajit, the kingdom fell into the hands of the harem, who knew best what goes on in the palace, and through a complicated chain of ears, what goes on everywhere. The old perfumed queens run things in the city of pigs these days. They make sure the tale spreads far and wide of what wronged wives may wreck. It was bad there for a while, though, she mused, while they made their way to the throne. There was a terrible spate of poisonings. Some of us here do poison from time to time if work is hard. I've heard such things from them. They love to see Father Femi and his pretty bows. Maybe one day we'll trudge back to the jungle and let Mother see what became of you, eh? She prodded the great pig, and he moaned again. Where do you think they were going? Whispered Immaculata. Messignane shrugged. Fools are a keen old pack of crows. There's a fool for every scrap of knowledge in the world, I'd bet, and they talk to each other. I think they went to the Isle of the Dead. I think he went to bury her, to do as much as one star does for another in the way of funeral rites. I thought I saw tears in the odalisk's eyes, but I could not imagine why. She had known this woman for a moment, and so what if she was a star? The son was my father, and he never slept on a stove. Can I offer you supper? Said the gold-eyed pygmy cheerfully. I have a nice rasher of bacon back in my tent. She grinned, and her teeth were small and sharp. Once Messignane had filled us with bacon and rhyming songs about the laziness of pigs and men, we wandered alone through the Vistreccia. Taglio and Immacolata learned many tricks with their cards and silks, and they purchased a ramshackle cart with a particularly moving rendition of the Rape of Ambarabad, which we shall perform for you if you like. It was a favorite of Heinz and of mine, especially the part where the red ship sails up the harbor, which we made with fluttering blue gauze, and the three-breasted captain cuts the palace into amber coins for her hold. They bought this broken cart, and Taglio painted it blue to match my eyes, and Immacolata fixed its silver stars in their firmament. Finally, we found an amber cellar in a tall black hat with a long golden feather flopping on its side, and Hind asked eagerly for news of home, of her frog-spitting sister, of her father with his silly lessons. I told her she should not care. But she only smiled sheepishly and pressed the bearded fellow for gossip. I told her to let it lie. I told her, but she could not. Do I go whining back to the desert when Anupas dries up her sap and lies down by the water? No, I do not. But she could not let those who did not love her nearly so well as I lie still behind her as they ought. And so she heard from this man in his ridiculous hat that her father had died, and the bell of Ambarabad chimed in mourning day and night. Hind twisted her black beads. She looked at me stricken and buried her head in my mane. I pressed my broken jaw to her face, and her tears were hot as upas milk. It's all right, my girl, I whispered into her hair. They are gone now, and you are free of them. I will sing for you at any window you indicate with the smallest of your fingers, and we will be happy. There are many ways of being happy. We will find ours. Hind looked up at me miserably, scarlet strands of my hair clinging to her face. No, Grodeski, I must go home. I will not be forever the wicked sister. I must do as much as any woman does for her father, for her sister. I crouched down in the small mound of pearls that had spilled over her toes, my paws dark against them, and made my voice soft as fingers stroking old drum skins. I will never go back to that place. My jaw aches when I think of it. I will never touch amber again with these paws. Hind wept silently. I could not look at her. Are you leaving me? I growled. She flung her arms around me, and her beads were hard on my cheeks. Find me in Ajanab, she whispered, pearls streaming over my shoulders like tears. I will go there when all things which should be in the ground are buried. I will go there, and you will find me, and sing at my window, and I will come out to you. When the first silver streaks of dawn began to stream across the valley, she was gone, and so was the Vistreccia. A few tent spikes remained, a few pearls rolling loose and dirty. Taglio might have consoled me, and I went padding about the wreckage of the makeshift camp to find him, to find his boot-black hooves and his smiling face, which was dear to me, if not quite so dear as a wicked sister and her loud laughter. Immacolata and her Gaselli were down in the depths of the vale by a freezing stream which gurgled blue and frothy through the tall weeds. I'm going, the odalisque said quietly. I don't think I ever heard her raise her voice in all the time we walked paw by foot. She was calm as tea in a cup. She knows you care for her. You do not need to do more, said the eunuch, his head low. I will repay her gift to us. I've heard the story from 3 fools in a tragedian of her death, of how she killed the king and how her brother carried her body off from the palace. Where did he take her? What can she have in that cold, dark space where stars go? I will not let her languish. She did not let me. Finally, Immacolata's voice did break, and she struck her fists against the chest of her ersatz lover. What did you give to the star? She wept. I will give her no more than a little leaf. What did you give? What did you give? She ripped her scarlet ribbons from her braid, the long strands of hair coming with them, her tears terrible like water boiling to a white scrim on the bottom of an old pot. I'm not like you. I don't care about religion. She saved me. She saved me when you only watched and guarded the door. She said we were sisters. How can I let her go into the dark alone? I cannot abide a sister's suffering. I am sure she hasn't had enough of wild followers and grief-stricken siblings. She saw the leaf in me. She knew this day would come. Drink my tea and you will know what I dream of. Wear my shoes and you will know what I dream of. I dream of my sister alone and weeping. He held her then and stroked her torn hair. I could not hear what he said against her skin, but I saw the sharp gleam of blood again, and I saw him dry her tears. She stood back from him, an old, familiar smile on her face. I have one last thing for you, who has as much of my blood in him as his own. I do not want anything else. I only want you to stay. She tried to laugh, but it came out poorly, a broken cello string. Please, my love, don't. She needs me. The Odalisque shook her hair back. I'm made of tea, remember? It will be as though I simply steep in endless water. And because of that, I can do a thing which would amaze anyone in the Vistrecha. Come close, my dear gazelle, and jump through my ear. What? Don't be ridiculous. Taglio recoiled. She only laughed. I'm only tea. Can you not leap through a tea bush? So you may leap through me and come out the other side. She went to him, put her hands on his face, kissed his eyelids. Taglio, dearest shepherd, dearest sheep, in this way you may enter me, and it will be as though we neither of us have lost anything in our lives. He pressed his head into her, and I could hear his sobs, the sound of them like planks of wood splintering under a bronze axe. But he drew back, and to my never-ceasing surprise, took a running start and leapt into the ear of Immaculata. The tale of the 12 coins continued. He came out of her clothes all in green, and he was as he was before the harem, as the Geselli always were. His buckles shone brilliant, his cap was soft as a mule's nose, but he looks at the green now and sees no pretty dell and unguarded campfire. He sees her leaves. Morning clothes, he calls them, the green of young tea plants. He has never taken off the clothes of her body, and in this way I think he dwells within her always. They waded into the stream together then, hand in hand, waist deep in the rushing, icy water. Immaculata turned to her eunuch and smiled, tears spilling down her cheeks like cream onto a rich table. She reached up behind his ear and with a little flourish produced a shimmering silver leaf out of the air. You must find the Isle of the Dead. Take the seed of me to her. I know you will do this for me. I know it as well as I know the lines of my palm and the hairs of my head. Go into the world and take me out of it. This is my heart. Carry it with you. I will dream of you in the dark, and you will taste it in my tea and feel it in my shoes. With that, Immaculata dissolved slowly in the water like sugar. She drifted apart, each brown leaf wafting slowly onto the stream. The current held her for a moment, a great circle of leaves with green-clad Taglio in the center, then carried them off and away. Oubliette and I gawked at the manticore, our mouths hanging open as though we had gone simple. And as we sat curled in her tail, the great red beast closed her sparkling eyes and began to sing low and soft, like a wooden flute and a diamond trumpet playing together. She did not lie about her songs. We wept openly under the strokes of her voice, the lost, sorrow-bound notes moving against us like hands, telling us how beautiful Immaculata was as she drifted downstream, and how it pierced grotesquely to hear Taglio keen and scream as he did on that lonely bank. Finally, she closed her misshapen jaw, and we came slowly to ourselves. We had both been abandoned by our best-loved beasts. It seemed right to carry out their wishes together, and we went first after the Isle of the Dead. Did you find it? I said, breathless. No, she said shortly. And it is my turn now. We are going to Agenab, and I will sing for my girl at every window until she comes to one, her black beads tumbling out, and calls me up to her. The great beast glared defiantly at us, setting her jaw as best she could, daring us to mock her. We nestled in quickly against her, and there were no more stories that night. After a time, all of us slept, even her scarlet fur buffeted by snores. I woke in that awful cold that seeps in sometime between midnight and dawn, as if the sky had frozen and its black edges crept into your clothes through every seam. Even in the cart with its warm curtains, I shivered and turned to Oubliette for warmth as we always had. But she was gone, an empty space in the coil of Grotesque's tail where she had been. My stomach seized. In all those years I had never woken to an empty bed. She had never been anything but there and heavy and warm as the night. Don't leave me, don't leave me, don't leave me, went the refrain of our life together. Carefully I moved the coils of the manticore's tail from my legs, gingerly lifting the beetle-green shell of the scorpion tip from the door frame, and crept outside into a cold that stung my face like birch branches. Taglio rested next to the long blue bars of the cart, his green clothes clung with dew, ice stuck to the bottom of his boot-black hooves. Oubliette lay asleep, curled against him like a cat, face clouded with dreams but not frightened. I do know the look of fear on her face. I know it so well. I wanted to go to her and sleep against her as I used to tuck my head into her shoulder and breathe together, to hold her between me and the dark. But perhaps she was not entirely mine anymore. Perhaps she had not snuck out of the cart on a whim, and I should not disturb her. I crawled under the cart handles and drew myself up next to Oubliette anyway, her familiar body, her familiar smell. Taglio stirred and extended his long, slender arm over both of us. I couldn't find it, he sighed. That's what you want to know, isn't it? How could I stop looking? How could I let her go? I tried so hard, but the paths that go to that aisle are hidden and dark, and I could not find them. I am a shepherd. I know only the well-tilled fields and plots of earth where folk have lived back to back to back to their greatest grandparents. I couldn't find it, and Grotesque deserves her chance too. Someday I will start the search again. Perhaps in Agenab there is a map-maker who knows the way, or a poet who has heard how it is done. Gently, so as not to wake Oubliette, he pulled a small box from his jerkin, an intricate box of tea wood with a sweet green shoe carved on its lid and inlaid with beryl. He opened it, and there lay inside a silver leaf, glimmering and dark and pale. But I keep her with me, always and always, he said, and closed the lid again. And so we traveled together, ever wending toward Agenab, which proved to be farther than I could have imagined the ghost city could carry us. I had never dreamed of a world so wide. We walked, we rode, we performed to keep bread in our bellies, lacking anyone capable of spitting out pearls for our daily use. And Taglio caught the occasional gamey rabbit. Oubliette went with him to hunt, and she became a wild thing, rarely speaking, growing lean and tall, her movements sudden and sharp. In our little show, she danced. There was a red curtain in the cart, and when there were more than a few villagers with pennies clutched in their turnip-pulling hands, we strung it up high and pulled Grotesque's tail through it, slung with a thin green sock to hide the barb. She shuddered when we pulled the cloth over her every time, but she did not protest. It was our best act. We had others. Grotesque often sang, and as she sang, she turned her face to the sky and wept. And this never failed to fill our baskets with food and money, for the manticore's song seemed to grip folk by the wrist and empty their pockets by force. Taglio danced, but he often frightened folk who knew how the dances of the Gazelli usually end. More often he tied a ribbon to his manticore and terrified them with his tamed monster. More often than not, Grotesque devoured the ribbon in disgust afterwards, and we were always short of them. But Oubliette's dance was the best thing we knew how to do. With her sock in place, Grotesque's tail was a very convincing snake, and she and Oubliette performed a strange and sinuous dance while Taglio played his pipes or his fiddle of almond wood. As the years went on and the road grew a little shorter, I learned to play his fiddle, and we accompanied the beast dance together. It was always an alien, affecting thing when Oubliette danced. Though she wore a long dress, some villagers called it obscene, but that was only because she danced so desperately, faster and faster each time, and never twice the same. She danced as though she could dance her way out of the sod tower, and the golden ball, and the ghost city, and the hedgehog's love. What she danced while Grotesque writhed her tail in undulating patterns, flicking it and swelling it and coiling it in lazy circles, was the story we learned in the Vestrecha. A story we never found unknown in any hamlet or within any burgher's wall, of a woman who was also a snake, who was also a star, and how her husband betrayed her, and how she took her revenge. By the final notes, Oubliette would be concealed behind the curtain, and only the great green tail remained. My friend grew obsessed with this story and her dance. She hardly spoke to anyone anymore, though at night she could still not sleep alone and clung to Taglio or to me, or even the furry flank of the red lion. Once, when she was strapping knives to her calves in order to hunt deer, I tried to kiss her just once, just to see if I could. She recoiled and looked at me with bruised black eyes. "Why?" she said, her voice long and deep now, a grown woman finally. "Why would you do that?" "I don't know," I said, and it was true. She brought back a fawn that night. Its spots were white and eerie in the moonlight. And in the morning, she was gone, and Taglio's little wooden box was empty. And we will pick up next week, just there. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask? The lazy father sleeping on the stove and the jumping through the ear are both from Russian folklore. Quite a bit of Russian folklore scattered throughout this one, among many, many others. I'm glad you guys liked it. I like it when you like it. I enjoy that a good portion of the story is about tipping your performers. But what happens next? I don't know. I don't know any more than you do because I forgot everything I wrote. Like the amount I've forgotten about, especially this portion. I remember stuff from towards the end of this, but boy, just not a lot. I have no idea what happens next. We'll find out together on Wednesday. I'll do my outro stuff, and you guys can ask questions while I'm talking, and I'll get to them as soon as I'm done yammering on with the necessaries. As always, this has not been an audiobook of The Orphan's Tales in the Cities of Coin and Spice. It has been a play, a one-woman show. You can get music based on these books at sjtucker.com. You can buy copies of them at your local independent booksellers' web portals. Please, if you care what I think, and probably at this point you do, please do patronize them rather than the big A. The big A will be here forever. A lot of them may not. If you would like to support mine, it is printbookstore.com out of Portland, Maine. You can find me on Twitter at Kat Valenti. You can subscribe to my Patreon at Kat Valenti, which will have 3 big exciting rewards up in the next week, just at the $5 level, let alone the rest. You can catch up in the archive at Kat Valenti Live on YouTube. And if you would like to tip your performers, as the Manticore says to do, if you'd like to toss a coin to your Manticore, there's a tip jar on my Instagram profile, my YouTube profile, and my website, which is catherinemvalenti.com. And anything that you can give would be deeply, deeply appreciated by our little family who, like most people, are going through a pretty tight time right now. I will thank you by name on the next stream if you do throw any support the Manticore's way, and unless you tell me you don't want me to. And I think that's it. I'm glad you find it comforting to listen to. We've at least gotten out of the really upsetting portions, I think. I don't think there's anything quite as upsetting as the mint coming at any point. But yeah, we're definitely getting a bunch of connections through Zamea's story is kind of the core that ties everything together in all of this. What is my favorite kind of tea? Someone asked that last time, and I had to admit that I don't drink tea anymore. I used to, but I just don't anymore. But if forced to choose, I like a good black tea. I like an English breakfast. I love, and I said persimmon tea last night. Persimmon tea is such a specific thing. I don't even know where to get it in this country, which sounds unforgivably hipster. I love, there's a smoky, really smoky, a Lapsang Souchong, I think, tea that I really like when I have it. I know. It's just that like coffee is a lot more bang for one's buck than tea, so I just kind of switched over to coffee and never went back. Favorite dessert? Oh goodness. The dessert I haven't had before. Like I always try to find something I haven't had before, but I guess it's sticky toffee pudding, which is just incredible and a huge pain to make at home. So I only ever get it in restaurants. But I love sticky toffee pudding. Yeah. And wine is technically a dessert. Anything's a dessert if you have it after other food. Well, thank you all so much for coming tonight. We will continue on with the Tale of the Crossing Continued as the next bit. I don't know. Let's peek ahead and see what the next new tale is. The Ferryman's Tale. So we'll find out about our friend Idle next time on Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Same fairy tale time, same fairy tale channel. And yes, the wine is Bordeaux. That is my favorite wine. So usually the wine is Bordeaux. Actually, I can't even quite say that because they don't sell Bordeaux at the Island store. So the wine is Bordeaux if one of us has been to town recently. And Heath has. So yes, thank you all so much. I'll see you guys in a couple of days. Have a good evening. Please stay safe. Please stay home and with masks on and do the things you're supposed to do. In the name of my family and yours. Amen. Good night, everyone. Love you all.